It sort of remains not necessary to say, but I want to remind you that movies and film are ubiquitous. And lest we not know exactly what that word means, I looked it up. Existing or being everywhere all of the time. You know, you can't go to a sandwich place, sometimes called a sports bar, without 18 banks of flat screen televisions. You can't go to a kid's recreational area without those kinds of things. So we as Christians need to be thoughtful and aware that not every story told reflects ways God intended reality to be. And I want to actually remind you, I haven't said this to you lately in this setting, but I've actually been explaining to people, remember that the Bible is simply God's revelation about how reality works. Now, it's been in a historical context and such, but he's revealed himself dealing in the ways of humans, and by that we know how he wants to deal with us. And so that is something we need to keep in mind. We're dealing with reality. And also, these days where mainstream culture, and I would encourage you not to call it secular culture. I'm not even sure philosophically it is secular, but that's a term that sets up a duality that the Scripture never really has. That's a Greco-Roman notion. It's not a Hebraic notion. It's not a Semitic notion, and it's therefore a false expression of the way reality is, though there is a secular philosophy and that kind of thing. But in mainstream, conventional present culture, which there is a secular dimension to it, but there's also a spiritual dimension to it, they wrestle with this idea, is there really truth? So I obviously assume that there is truth. God is objectively real, whether somebody believes in him or not. And it's my conviction that the Scripture lays out that even his morality is embedded into Scripture. And there is a dynamic of the way human flourishing happens, whether you're religious or not. It's still, if you operate in line with his ways, you will have more human flourishing and more joy and happiness and delight and such than if you don't. For example, if we had an honest citizenry and a moral citizenry which didn't believe in just, having sex with anybody you want to and leaving a horde of motherless and fatherless children strewn around where society has to take care of them, our taxes would be lower. So, what's so dang religious about that? Nothing is religious about that, and yet everything is religious about that. You see, I often say in teaching some classes, Deuteronomy 23, I call it the poop passage, where God tells the Israeli army to literally carry a shovel, and when they relieve themselves, a million guys out there taking a dump anywhere they want, that could be a fairly unsanitary situation. What's religious about that? See, God is not a religious God. God is the God of all of life. And all of life needs to be lived in line with him in a fallen world. And there are negative dynamics to this fallen world, and we need to deal with them. And one is personal hygiene, another is community sanitation, and another is, civil morality that doesn't just cramp our style, it literally releases us into the freedoms of human flourishing that we like. Okay, we don't need a lecture on that, but as we think about this issue, we as Christians need to be thoughtful and aware that not every story told in film and television and other contexts reflects the way God intended reality to be and the virtues to be embraced. And because the liturgies, and I've used that word on purpose, they're sometimes called by one philosopher, James K.A. Smith, the liturgies of the mall. That is, when we're depressed, what do? We go shopping. We don't go praying. We go shopping. I think the praying would probably be more productive in a number of ways, but our liturgies, how do you deal with stress? You develop little life liturgies, and it would be good for you to figure those out and ask God to help you replace them with productive liturgies. and such. So anyway, because the liturgies of film and TV watching have such heart-shaping impact that we cannot afford not to be thinking biblically and Christianly, as Francis Schaeffer used to say, about the film and TV we watch. Many of us watch at least 5 hours per day, actually 5 hours and 4 minutes, or 35.5 hours a week, slightly more than 77 days a year, according to one study that I looked at. Now, we have to also understand that TV nor film is neutral. So we can't say, well, it doesn't really make a lot of difference. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. But no TV or film experience does nothing. I just want to remind us of that. And actually, we know all of this thing. And therefore, the repetitive nature of our media marinate. You know what marinate is? You know, like you get a steak and you put teriyaki sauce and you let it, lay there for 24 hours, and it seeps into the being, the fabric of whatever you're seasoning. Well, this media marinate is so strong that we must be active, not passive, related to what our media saturation really is and what it is doing to me and to my loved ones and to my network and such. And any of us who have kids or nieces and nephews or grandkids, we know this, and we even think about monitoring the media time and all that kind of thing. So let me suggest 4 questions to you that you can ask yourself and your network repeatedly related to film. And I want you to we'll keep coming back around on this a little bit tonight. So Dave, you can bring those things up on the screen, if you will. The first one is, does it tell the truth about life and reality? It's just a good question to ask. Does this, I loved The Notebook, but I can only watch it once because it's about, Alzheimer's. And my mom passed away with Alzheimer's. And that movie is so, actually, I think it's wonderful. Isn't that, is it a Christian film? We're not going to really talk about that kind of thing tonight, but I think it manifested all kinds of good, actually biblical virtues and stuff, and I guess you could pick the storyline apart, but I don't think we need to do that kind of thing. But it's so powerful to me, I can't watch it again, because it just brings me back into my mom's situation, which I've dealt with and I'm free from, but that's just a hard thing. But it does tell some truth about life and reality, and what it told, I thought, was pretty beautiful. I don't remember every detail of the storyline, so don't nail me about some little detail on it. But my, coming away from that, I thought that was a beautiful movie. Does it vindicate virtue and reveal vice for what they are? There's a movie I saw a number of years ago, maybe 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. It was Traffic with Michael Douglas, and it was about the drug problem in upscale Washington, D.C., and it was about a kid. Man, I can't watch that movie again either, but it was really a great movie, I thought, because it really revealed the non-glamorous, the destructive dynamic of what drugs does. And I'd say that was a good movie, even though it was a hard one for me to watch, and I don't want to watch it again, but there you go. For a third question, what does it say about goodness, truth, and beauty? What does it say about goodness, truth, and beauty? And any one of these questions, I would suggest to you, you can turn them around, which we need to do. Does it reveal badness, non-truth, and ugliness? I mean, for what it is, does it reveal that? And so there might be some really hard films. I'm thinking of a movie about Beirut that I saw with the real famous guy that I can't remember right now. He was on Clooney. I thought it told a great story about the tension of what's going on over in the Middle East. And then what view of the good life does it give? In some ways, my wife and I argue about this, quite frankly, because every one of us has an idea of a good life. That is that deep, inner, subconscious picture of what it would be great if I had, unlimited funds, unlimited time, and no restraints. Now, maybe in this room, a lot of us, when I talk to you about my donor in Maui who opens up their home to us almost any time we want and cares for us and lets us come over there with frequent flyer miles, you go, oh, that's wonderful. And it really is. But once I was working in northern Honduras and we took a bunch of kids to the beach because in my world about the good life, the beach was the good life. And they were kids from an at-risk neighborhood and they lived kind of close to the beach. And we came to the beach and they didn't know what to do. Because in their culture, they had a different view of what the good life was. But people, we worship what we think the good life is. We'll go after it. And and frankly, I think the movies that we like somehow in one way or another affirm the good life. And I just think we have to be asking that question. Just very quickly, some other ways to ask those same questions in a sort of a different motif. What's the bias of the film? I mean, do you ever ask that? There are some of the new areas, some of the Netflix stuff. Pam and I like to watch those things, and especially when we look at a new thing, I'm trying to figure out what the bias is, and does it really reflect something that I want to sort of unconsciously massage me and mold my heart towards? And frankly, I like the James Bond and Mission Impossible things, and there's like sort of vigilante justice, and I've been wrestling with, should I like that? I don't know, but at least I'm asking the question, and that's what I'm saying is key. What's the bias of the film? And every film has one. What's the film saying about human flourishing? And it seems to me that most every film says something about what the good life is. What is this film normalizing? I think that's really an important thing. Every film normalizes something, I believe, and we're seeing alternative ways of life and such really being normalized on television and a number of those things. Well, I think we have to at least. It's not that we don't necessarily go to these films, and I'm not a sort of a redneck, knee-jerk kind of guy, but just to go there and just drink it in and not be thinking about it and even discussing it. And certainly if we have kids and such, I've got a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old granddaughter. And frankly, I did not walk rightly in total righteousness before I really surrendered my life to the Lord with regard to dating and the way I related to the opposite sex. And frankly, I want to raise those conversations with my 13-year-old and 15-year-old because they're right in the middle of a culture that doesn't have restraints. And now, you can't come off again like a redneck wacko, but you definitely need to raise these issues. And my daughter, my granddaughter, 13-year-old, she wrote me a Happy Grandpa Day note. She said, "Thank you, Grandpa, for all the questions that you helped me answer." I went, "Good night." Whoa, Jack. And, you can't tell. You got to converse. You got to interact, and we've got many parents here, and you know that. But what is this film normalizing? And I want to ask those questions with my grandkids. What views or values, what views, this is how I do my lectures, or values does this film promote? You got to think about that. So those are the little things I wanted you to think about. What's the bias of the film? What's the film saying about human flourishing? What is this film normalizing? And what views or values does this film promote? And then, of course, you do the processing of this biblical worldview and how are you going to interact with these kinds of things. Those things will help you, I believe, as we think about our context and particularly then the realities of how we utilize film, how we live with film, and then how we actually take advantage of this most powerful storytelling genre. Remember, it creates environments wherein we touch either the transcendent realities of life, and we have to figure out whether those realities are virtuous, pointing towards God, or are they vice and move us away from God. And sometimes there's a little bit of both, so we need to be praying and thoughtful about that.